Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Qdabra's weekly webinar. My name is Kirby Laborde, and I'm going to be the host for today's webinar. We'll teach you some really good CSS and JavaScript techniques that you can use to style your forms, because who doesn't want attractive forms, right? So Kaoru Okumura is with us now, and she's going to show us these techniques. She's one of our project managers here at Qdabra, and she's very knowledgeable when it comes to web development. She knows a lot of quirks and methods of implementing CSS and JavaScript. And at the end of this webinar, Joan Tandaan, our software test engineer, will show us a bonus technique on iFrame height adjustments. So before I pass the mic to Kaoru, let me launch some quick polls for you. All right, so the first poll is, have you attended FormsViewer with CSS webinar in April? So
one person attended.
Yep. It looks like one person attended that webinar. So if you haven't watched that webinar, I encourage you to visit our YouTube channel and search for the April 23 webinar video with the title Modernize Your FormsViewer Forms with CSS. So that's the part 1 of our CSS and JavaScript tips for you. So today's going to be part 2. So for the second poll, I'm just going to launch another one. So do you use your FormsViewer form embedded in your web page or in your SharePoint page? So some of you might be using your forms in your SharePoint page or web page.
Yeah, classic page, you remember?
Yep.
That's good information. Like... Modern page has a lot of limitation, as you know.
So yeah, thanks for answering these questions. So without further ado, let's call on Kaoru to start.
Okay, thank you very much, Kirby, for the introduction. So today, this is a part 2 of how to utilize CSS and script to make your FormsViewer form more stylish. Given that some of you haven't attended in the demo in the last month, let me show you something. So this is the demo we did in the last month's webinar. And this looks like regular web page. Like this has a header and a footer and some menu that expand on Hoover. However, this is a FormsViewer form. So now you can handle this much like a regular webinar page, regular web page, something like this. And also the one I like is a kind of floating level so that you can type in and you can see the level moves up. However, there wasn't not so perfect as I mentioned, because in this technique, the good thing is in the previous one, what we do utilize this kind of technique is you have to dive in to the source code and add class or ID on a specific section of the form to get to specify the target of certain CSS. The good thing for this is, without going to the each source code, what I introduce is, it's a kind of a trick or hack. However, there is an advanced in InfoPath UI. You can specify advanced thing like a screen tip, which is not used in most scenario. So I use specific naming on this, like my header. Then this appears into the HTML code. So I can use this to get the target. However, the issue last time was because this is tooltip. Tooltips appear. Like here you can see the tiny tooltip saying my image effect 01, and this is not so beautiful. That's the reason I said, well, this is not perfect yet. So this week, I'd like to introduce a new tiny JavaScript code, which resolves this one. In fact, this JavaScript switch the to screen tip and remove the screen tip and put it into the class. So, given that this kind of key or naming appears in class, we can write CSS much more compact style. So, let me show this one. And floating level, let me use the floating level. But using the screen tip. Oh, this is the new style. So you can see this one, but without seeing any annoying screen tip here. And well, also I added the method for drop down too on the label. So in fact, this is the second one, but okay. We are going to provide two types of CSS. One is the one we provided last month, like circling this one, and another style is using the underline. So you can choose which style you like. All right, then let me move to another demonstration. So the second demonstration is what I call semi-responsive table. This is really bare bone, but you may have a kind of form like two columns and one long column and three columns and so on. And the interesting thing is when I move this or change the window size, now if the window size or browser's width is small, then the layout changes. As you can see, responsive item often in website. Or also in case of mobile, let me open the back window and I'm going to set this mobile like an iPad because iPad has not enough resolution. However, it is really small and I hate having the multiple column in iPad. So now you can see that we have a wide column for every field. Okay, so to make this happen, we just have one additional CSS and the JavaScript for screen tip swap that I introduced, as well as device detection JS. And in case you've ever wondered what kind of CSS I am using in this one, let me show this on responsive table and responsive CSS. It is so simple. I just change the display for table body, TR and TD as block. If the browser width is small, or this is called from mobile. All right, this is two tiny sample that you can utilize CSS. And now Joanne is going to explain much more complex one.
Okay, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
All right. So hello everyone. So for those who were able to attend the April 9 webinar, it's the first time that we presented the task pane technique. And at the time, we're using a fixed two-column table for the content and task pane. Let me show you that really quick. And this sample doesn't allow for a flexible content box, and the task pane, as you can see, is just fixed, cannot be expanded or collapsed. So since we wanted to explore ways on how to improve this task pane sample, we found a solution with CSS Flexbox, which allows to add a task pane in the form without positioning it in a two-column table. And I'm going to show you two samples. The first one is using a regular InfoPath formatting rule to hide show the task pane. So if I click on this toggle button here, you'll see that it shows the task pane. And you'll notice that this content and all the fields in it are squeezed or scrunched to make way for the task pane. And that is our Flexbox working in the background. Although this sample is using plain CSS, no JavaScript, and we're using a plain formatting rule in InfoPath. That's why when I click on this toggle, you'll notice that it's showing abruptly. So we made a further improvement to that. So I'm going to show you the next sample. So in this second style, you'll see that when I toggle here on the hamburger button, the task pane is making a sliding transition. So it's kind of doing a smooth expand collapse action there. And you'll see that the buttons, when clicked or when you hover on it, are showing some highlight, and it will show the corresponding sections in the view. The content is also independent from the task pane. So when you have a very long table like this repeating table here, it will show its own scroll bar. It's just not very visible, but because I'm using a dark mode theme here, but it's there. And also the task pane, when it grows longer, like for this sample, I have a help section, which is a long description. So when you click on this and it shows this instruction, it will also show its own scroll. So that's how it looks in FormsViewer. Now I'm going to show you how it looks in InfoPath Designer mode. Okay. So as you can see, the form is just really simple. I have several sections there, as you can see, and all of my sections are being contained in one main parent section, which includes the content and task pane. And each sections here are making use of Karu's technique, like what she showed you earlier. She used the screen tip here. So I have the screen tip there because when this form is rendered in the browser, the screen tip is being recognized in HTML as a title attribute. And I'm using the screen tip swap from Karu to swap this title attribute to classes in CSS. So all of the sections, so this is the main section, and my task pane section also make use of that screen tip. And it is important that we use this prefix my underscore because that's being used in Karu's JavaScript. So that's the task pane. This is the content. Okay, so, oops, sorry. So once the screen tip is converted to classes, I can now reference them in my CSS here. So this is the piece of code in my CSS where I'm telling the main parent section to use this property display flex. So when this property is used, all child sections of the main parent will be flexible and responsive. That's why you're seeing this responsive effect here in the content and the controls. So if you want to know more about CSS Flexbox, you can Google it. Just type in Flexbox CSS, and if you're a beginner, you can use the W3 School site. They have a very basic or simple explanation of what Flexbox is, and you can try out different structures or models. For the sliding transition, I'm using this JavaScript called sidebar.js, and this JavaScript, as well as the CSS file, is being loaded in the form using qrules command load resource. Maybe some of you are already familiar with that. So this JavaScript is calling our classes in CSS. So for example, this line here is just getting the element content. There's actually an ID element in the XSL called content and task pane, and it's calling the class called content shift, which is in my CSS here. So it's just basically saying that when the task pane is displayed, it will decrease 250 pixels from the width of the content. So so in this state, the content of the or the width of the content is 100%. I can't click on it. Oh, right. Okay. And when I show the task pane, it is decreasing that with 250 pixels to make way for the task pane. So if you want to explore the JavaScript and CSS files, you can go to data and resource files and export them, open them in Notepad if you want to learn more about them. So we're giving out the sample forms for free. You can check the help section for instructions on how to customize this sample form to fit for your form requirements. So it's very easy to customize. You can put your logo here, specify your form name, and just add your fields and controls depending on your form requirements. So we don't have an XTP for this yet, but if you want to add this technique to an existing form, it's very easy to copy the form logic. Yep, so that's for my demo for the task pane flex sliding. Back to you, Karu.
Thank you. So now it's time for bonus tips, and I have been working on how to make FormsViewer more web page like. And for example, what I like to do is, and I want to embed FormsViewer form. All right. Oh, this is still on the back mode. I need to make it not this one. Sorry. I need to make webinar test. For example, This is the page of Qdabra.com, and I'd like to put a FormsViewer Form in education page. Now, there's FTP tool, and this is webinar test ASPX. And now, okay, this page has no master page and no contents yet. So I'm going to put the Forms Viewer contents on this page. So at that time, I am going to create a new template here, and this is the one that we have the data of our weekly webinar form. And I need to make it anonymous because this is public web page. Then I can open this form. In fact, this form shows the past webinar list. It's a long list you may already familiar with. So I'd like to show this in our website. So I'm going to copy this and before that, maybe I'd better to copy. And in general, we use iFrame to utilize Forms Viewer in other web page. And now I am replace the source like this. And let me beautify this and saving this and upload this. Then, excuse me, our page on Qdabra.com now show the list. However, the limitation of iFrame is we have to decide width and height. And I have to scroll here, and I don't like this. So there are some technique to make the iframe height automatically. We tested several techniques existing in the world, and not everyone work. But this technique called iframe resizer works well with Forms Viewer. So for the technique, there are two components, two different JavaScript. We have to put this one called Content Windows Mem to Forms Viewer. I've already put this one. And another thing is iFrame Resizer Mem. I'm going to put this in web page site. So it's calling the iFrame. So in fact, I've already prepared this here. Okay, and we are including this JavaScript and kick this this function. And I'm going to save this, publish this, and let's see if this page now has an automatically adjusted height. So I'm really happy with this technique. So that this seems much more stylish web page. So, given that we are using JavaScript, and because SharePoint Modern Page has a lot of limitation, and in general we cannot use JavaScript. So this technique works really well with your web page or SharePoint classic page. But unfortunately, does not work well with modern page right now. So this is the end of the story I'm going to share with you. Now, do you have any question on the CSS technique? So now there are a lot of CSS or JavaScript technique on the website, and if you are familiar with, you can find on the web on the on the web and try to apply this to your Forms viewer.
Thanks, Karu.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Karu and Joanne, for those wonderful demos. And we encourage everyone to try these different CSS styles in your forms. And don't worry, we're going to provide a webinar package for you that includes all the sample forms and files used in the demos, as well as some documentation to guide you. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the question box, and we'll try to try our best to answer them. So while we're waiting for your questions, I'd like to take this chance to introduce FormsViewer. So for those of you who haven't heard about FormsViewer, we encourage you to check it out. It's the only app out there that lets you continue your InfoPath investment, because as you already know, support for InfoPath will end in 2026. And our goal is to help companies using InfoPath to keep their investment. And we're continuously updating this app to provide you more handy features that can help extend your forms. In fact, we just launched FormsViewer version 5.1. We have new updates and new features added for you. So go check it out now. It's available in the SharePoint App Store. And if you want a quick demo of FormsViewer and what it can offer you, feel free to drop us an email at support@qdabra.com, and we'd be happy to schedule a meeting with you. And we also encourage you to take the survey after this webinar. Let us know if the topic today is helpful to you, and if you want to see more CSS tutorials for your forms or any other techniques that you'd like to learn, so we can help you build your forms. So it looks like there are no questions in the question box, so I guess everything is clear to you. So thanks again, Karu and Joanne, for those helpful tips and tricks and for preparing the demos and the slides. And thanks everybody for attending the webinar. We look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.